What is up, Knicks fans? Welcome back to yet another episode of Fireside Knicks with your host, Dylan Backer. And last night, the New York Knicks absolutely crushed the Detroit Pistons, winning the game by 30 points, but it was led by none other than Jalen Brunson, the guy that we had been waiting for to really kind of have that big game. He had that last night against Detroit. 36 points, 5 assists, 2 steals, 14 of 22 from the floor, and 6 of 8 from 3. He was a plus 23 on the night. Just phenomenal all around from start to finish. He took over that game, and that's what we really wanted. You know, the last couple games from Brunson were kind of not Brunson-like. You know, I mean, he wasn't, like, bad, but they weren't, like, you know, the kind of games that we want to really see from him. The ones where he's taking over, scoring 30-plus points, and just taking over from start to finish. We weren't really seeing that. In fact, he had back-to-back games where he only shot 33% from the floor. So his efficiency was going down. You know, he didn't look like Brunson. You know, and I don't think anyone was really worried about him, because I know for myself I wasn't exactly worried about Brunson. I knew at some point that, you know, he was really going to kick it into high gear, but you want to see him get going. You know, we don't want to see him get off to a slow start. Luckily, we had Karl-Anthony Towns be able to pick up the slack against Miami, where he had 44 points and 13 rebounds, which is still the best performance by a Knick so far this season. But I think this game right here by Brunson is the obvious second best one, because this game he just took over. Like I said, you know, the Pistons defense was atrocious, to say the least. I mean, the paint was wide open every single play. Brunson was able to operate inside. He was able to have those one-on-one matchups that I highlighted in an article right before that game on EmpireSportsMedia.com. You know, you wanted him to get those kind of one-on-one matchups. You didn't want them doubling him or anything like that. You wanted him to be able to get on an island, work in the pick and roll, and all that stuff. And this is what happened as a result of it. He just took over that game, and the Pistons stood no chance. Now, I know it's the Detroit Pistons, and I know, like, you know, when you play a team like the Pistons, you should win by a lot. But that's what good teams do. You're supposed to win these games by a lot of points and have your stars take over. Even if it's a really bad team like the Pistons, these type of performances are still very encouraging. You got to have games like this, you know, to be able to win games. And I think really, and I'm going to get to the starting five in a second, because that's another thing I really want to talk about today. But I think what's most important here is that, like, we're seeing the full potential of the Knicks at the moment. We are. Because last game against Miami, we saw Towns take over, as I just mentioned. And then this game last night against Detroit, we see Brunson take over. And Towns still had a great game himself. But we're now seeing what this team can be when everyone's playing at a high level, when they're playing at their best, which really makes this team dangerous, you know. And I know it sounds crazy for me to be like, oh yeah, this Knicks team's going to be amazing just because they smacked the Detroit Pistons, who, you know, were one of the worst teams in the NBA last year and have been for the past several years. But it's still an NBA team, and that's, like I just said earlier too, good teams are supposed to do that to bad teams. They're supposed to smack them around and just give them no chance whatsoever. If the Knicks would have won this game and it was a close game, I would have been more concerned than anything, than encouraged, to be honest with you. Like, yeah, a win's a win and you take it regardless, but the fact that they just dominated this game, wire to wire, never trailed in this game, and Brunson had the game he just had, I'm really, really encouraged now by what this team can do. Because we've, you know, quite frankly, it's been a tough schedule for them to start the year. This was the first team that they've played this year, actually, that didn't make the postseason last year. The first 4 games before that were all against teams that were in the playoffs last year. So I think really just overall, I'm just excited for what this team can do. I think the ceiling is only going higher from here. I think now we're starting to see these guys mold a little bit more, and we're seeing the stars break out and the stars do what they're supposed to do. And that's what I'm really excited about. I know it's early, but really, it was just a great performance all around from Brunson, getting every which way, knocking down three-pointers. In fact, he made his first 5 three-pointers in this game, which was a big thing to note because, like I mentioned before, his efficiency was down. He had back-to-back games where he just really struggled from anywhere on the floor, really, not even just from 3, but anywhere. You know, I think we kind of saw that he was starting to really get going a little bit in the second half against Miami on Wednesday, because he had 18 points in that second half after just, quite frankly, a brutal first half where he only had 4 points and made 1 shot. So I'm glad to see that the kind of shooting funk that he was in is kind of behind him now, because this was just a really hyper-efficient performance, and the Knicks continue to do that as a team, too. Shoot the ball very well, and that's why they're off to a successful start. They're 3-2 to start the year. I know some fans probably wish we were like 4-1 or 5-0, but a 3-2 start, you absolutely take that. You know, a lot of teams always start the year off slow. Look at the Milwaukee Bucks, for example. They're 1-4 to start the year despite having 2 superstars. So, you know, teams do this. They kind of get, sometimes just, it takes a minute for them to get into high gear. And with a team like the Knicks, where it's brand new, you have a bunch of new faces on the floor and a bunch of new guys on the court, you got to give them time to get some rhythm, which is kind of leads into my next point about the starting five. I think we're starting to see them really get into rhythm. They have now, all five starters have scored in double figures in 4 consecutive games. First time since 1989 that they have done that. And really, you're getting positive contributions from everybody. Everybody. I mean, last game, of course, against Detroit, we see Brunson and Towns, kind of lead the way. But you also got 21 points from OG Anunoby. You got an additional 15 from Mikal Bridges, another 13 from Josh Hart. You even got 10 points off the bench from Miles McBride. And their defense, the defensive synergy that these guys have, was unreal against Detroit. They stole the ball 16 times and forced 22 turnovers from Detroit. Detroit, obviously, coming into the game, was one of the more turnover-prone teams in the league. They really showed that last night because the Knicks just made it look easy on the defensive side. And as a matter of fact, all 6 guys that I just named, the 5 starters and then Miles McBride off the bench, all of them recorded more than 1 steal. All of them had multiple, and you had 3 from Mikal Bridges and 4 from McBride. I mean, really, there's nothing really that stands out to me that's like, oh, I'm worried about this or that. No, because, I mentioned it before. I said I like seeing the balance in the starting five. I like seeing all 5 starters score in double figures or all 5 guys kind of make a contribution offensively. But defensively, I like seeing that too because, when you have Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby together, you're expecting to be a good defensive unit night in and night out. And I know it's the Pistons, like I've been saying, and they're not good. They're a really bad team, very young team, still very deep in their rebuild. So I understand that, any team could have made the Pistons look like this, but I think, with the way the Knicks have been playing so far this year, I think this was the night we kind of are seeing their full potential. It is. And yes, again, bad team. You're supposed to smack a bad team. But we saw them have a good performance against Indiana, the team that knocked them out of the playoffs last year. Same thing. They beat them by 30 points. They came back down 13 from the Heat and beat them by 9 points, essentially a double-digit win. So we're really seeing these guys start to click. And that's really the biggest thing because I think a lot of people were a little worried about the starting five after the Boston Celtics game and wondering, is this going to be the unit that can actually beat Boston? And, that maybe that answer is still to be determined because we don't play Boston again for quite a while from now, so we won't really have another look at what the starting five can do when they're actually, actually fully used to each other until then. But for right now, I think I can take away from this is that the starting five is really clicking. They really are. I mean, every single one of them is doing something positive on both ends of the floor, and that's what you want to see. You want to see that night in and night out. You want to see, every guy have some sort of impact. You don't want to see one guy out there, one of the starters out there have just an awful night where they're basically a 0 on offense and they have, inefficient shooting and they're just not going on either end of the floor. And there's going to be nights that happens. There's going to be nights where one of maybe Brunson or Bridges or even Hart just has a very off night. They're just a non-factor in the offense. But that's what you have a deep starting five for. You have Karl-Anthony Towns in the starting five for that reason. You have him, to kind of pick up the slack a little bit. Same thing with guys like OG Anunoby. You have them there so that they can pick up the slack whenever things go south for some of the other guys. But when they're all clicking at once, that's really all you can ask for. I mean, the ball movement last night against Detroit was just phenomenal. I mean, tremendous. I have no complaints about the way the ball was moving whatsoever. They recorded 31 assists as a team and only turned it over 9 times. I mean, every which way, they were just getting clean looks, moving the ball around, getting open shots, and that's why they were able to shoot the ball so well. They ended up shooting over 50% in this game. Once again, continuing the efficiency that I mentioned at the start of this episode. They've been one of the more efficient teams in the league this year. In fact, they might even be the most efficient. I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but I know for a fact they're like top 3 in field goal percentage, and they're also up there in three-point percentage. They shot 47% from 3 in this game. If there's one area that I can point at to that said they really kind of weren't that great in, it was free throws. They were 6 of 10 from the free throw line. But when you only take 10 free throws and you win the game by 30, that just shows you how well you were shooting the ball offensively overall. It really does. And the ball was moving great. They were getting clean looks. Everybody was doing their part. And to kind of bring it back to Brunson a little bit, he was scoring both on the ball and off the ball. Obviously he's one of the better one-on-one isolation guys, one of the better shot creators in the entire league. And you saw that on full display last night against Detroit. But We also saw him kind of, making some nice cuts off the ball, moving around a bit, kind of getting some open looks for the other guys to create their own looks. And that's really what you can ask for. There were some great passes from Towns, and he had 7 assists in this game, by the way. That goes to show there. Towns is a very underrated passer as it is, and he just he just led the team in assists last night. He led the team in assists. There were 3 guys that had at least 5 assists. It was Brunson, Towns, and Anunoby. Anunoby with 6 assists. I mean, this is a guy you don't really expect to kind of move the ball around like that, but that just shows you how well they were playing together last night. All 5 starters looked like they were in sync. They knew where to be on the court. They knew their role, and they just dominated from start to finish. They led this game by 38 points at one point, and they led by 20 at halftime. It was just phenomenal to see. I was really excited about it. And I think most importantly, we can confidently say that Jalen Brunson is back. He's out of that little funk. Again, I don't think anyone was exactly super concerned about Brunson and what was going to happen with him, because I know I wasn't. We know how good Jalen Brunson is, and we know that, sometimes he kind of gets in these little funks, especially at the start of the year. He did the same thing last year, where he kind of started the year off a little slow. It wasn't like super, super bad, but it wasn't like the Jalen Brunson we saw in the playoffs last year where he was taking over from start to finish. And that's okay. I'd rather you kind of hit that little slide in the beginning where you're still trying to figure things out than late in the season, like in March or April when, you're about to gear up for the playoffs and your best player starts to struggle. That's what you don't want to see. But right now, though, I have all the reason to be encouraged about the outlook of this team and where they can go from here. Of course, it is still very early in the season. We're just now in November, so there's obviously still a lot more season to be played. We've only played 5 games, but I think so far I'm encouraged a lot, and I think it's only going to get better. If they look this good now in Game 5, where all 5 starters are scoring in double figures for four straight games, and they're shooting the ball very well, just imagine what they'll look like 20 games in or 30 games in. Later on in the season, around Christmas time, how they'll look. Because man, this team has some serious potential. They really do. And, even before the season, we had been highlighting that, this is probably the only team that can really threaten the Boston Celtics from repeating. And I still firmly believe that. I do. I know the Celtics absolutely smacked us on opening night, and, we didn't really stand a chance just because Boston was shooting the ball at a record pace. But one way or the other, ball will be tough to beat. They're going to be very hard to beat. But at the end of the day, I think we can be encouraged at the fact that the Knicks starting 5 is looking like this right now, and they're playing at a high level. Because, some nights it's going to be rough. There's going to be nights where you just aren't shooting the ball well, as we saw in the Cleveland game. They didn't have the best game there, and they ended up blowing a 13-point lead, and that's why they lost that game. But then you have nights like last night against Detroit where they just are dominant from start to finish, and they just absolutely bulldoze them, right? And we've seen them do this to good teams too. Last year when Anunoby came over and the starting 5 was clicking, they smacked teams like the 76ers, the Timberwolves, the Nuggets, the Magic. Very good teams. All teams that made the postseason. So we know that this team is very capable of doing some great things this year. And I know I'm projecting a lot into the future and stuff like that, but really, if this becomes a consistent thing, because so far it has been. I mean, I mentioned after one of these games where they all had double figures that if this becomes a more consistent thing, that this can be really something special. And right now, they continue to be consistent with that. 4 straight games in double figures from all 5 starters, and I think even the biggest thing there, you're getting production out of Josh Hart, even the guy who scored 2 points all preseason. So really, I'm just happy seeing the way they're gelling together. They're meshing well together. Everything's clicking. I think it's a coaching thing, too. I think Tom Thibodeau deserves some credit for making sure he's getting his guys involved, because there was that one stretch, where the first 3 games of the season, Karl-Anthony Towns wasn't as involved offensively. He didn't take a whole lot of shots, which is what you don't want to see. You don't want to see your second All-Star be passive, but now he isn't being passive. Now he's taking shots, and he's still making plays, as a facilitator. So really, I think everything's going well for the Knicks at the moment. I think this was easily their best game of the season. Obviously, again, it was a big, lopsided affair just because of the matchup. It's one of the best teams in the NBA versus, quite frankly, the worst team in the NBA, so you should expect a 30-point blowout. But I think we can at least be happy that it was a 30-point blowout and not a close game. Because if it was a close game, I think we'd be a little concerned about some things. We'd be more concerned about some guys in the starting 5, some of their roles and stuff like that. And I think one last thing that's important to remember, this team's not even at full strength yet. The starting 5 is healthy, but the bench is literally 3 guys. The bench is McBride, Payne, and Jericho Sims. And Jericho Sims has barely even been impactful. He was actually a plus-minus 0 despite the 30-point blowout, and he played 16 minutes in the game. So that's a discussion for another time, because I don't know if he should be the backup center much longer. I think Hukpori deserves a shot, but we can make that a long-term discussion at another time. But we're still missing Precious Achiuwa. We're missing Mitchell Robinson. Once they come back and we're fully healthy, this is a deep team. It is a deep team. I know the depth was kind of shot when we made the trades for Towns and Bridges and stuff, but I think either way you're going to have a very deep team. And the starting five is as locked in as they've ever been. And it's led by Brunson, and that's what you want to see. You want to see your captain lead this charge. You want to see Jalen Brunson take over and have games like he had last night, where he's just unguardable and he's just dropping points left and right, scoring buckets in every which way. So very pleased with how the game turned out. Very pleased with Brunson's performance. I think he needed a game like this. I think this was the game for him to kind of get right, and he did just that. So very happy with that. But guys, I don't have much else to say about this game, so we really hope you enjoyed this video. Let us know what you guys say about Jalen Brunson or the starting five in the comment section below, because I would love to hear about it and talk about it with you guys. You can follow all of our pages on social media: TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, of course this YouTube page that you were watching the video on. You can follow my personal Twitter account. It's right there on the screen. And I'll see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out.